So hey, what's up, everyone? You're currently tuned into the TBD live stream here, or KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara and NetNet Radio out of Tijuana. You just heard a live performance by musician Marc Merza, live from their home in Los Angeles, I believe. Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, I'm living in LA at the moment.
Tight. So how have you been holding up during a quarantine? Like, what have you been up to? How have you adapted? How do you like virtual gigs? Every artist I ask this usually has like mixed responses.
Yeah, certainly. I think I'll start with virtual gigs. I've done a couple of them since the pandemic. It's definitely a different you know workflow for me. I've
Yeah.
spent many years playing DIY shows in basements
Hmm.
and playing in front of people, and I think that it was hard for me at first to adapt to showcasing that stuff. Actually simultaneously I was doing these videos with my friend Julian Montenegro, where I was doing improv sessions out in
Hmm.
nature.
That's big.
um yeah, though exactly not being streamed live. They were kind of video presentations of that stuff. So I've kind of
Mhm.
treated a lot of these live streams that I've participated in like that. um but overall, the quarantine, I mean, it's been it's been really hard.
Yeah, I feel you. We were talking earlier. You got to be around people and stuff, and especially with like live stream gigs, like you're not in front of people, like you were saying. It's just like a weird situation. I remember when I first like decided, like, okay, like I still want to have people on my show because like that wasn't a thing anymore. Like in March and stuff, I hit up one of my friends and just to do like a test like stream or whatever,
Yeah.
and they're having a hard time adjusting because like you just can't see who's there. And so like he's like, I think I'm just playing into the void. I can't tell if anybody's like actually listening to this, like.
Totally.
So
I think there's a lot of pros and cons in it. I've, as a live musician, and one that's thrives on performance. I feed off of crowd reaction or just energy of the
mhm.
room, and that's really tough for me. Where I can't really see what anybody that's witnessing what's happening.
Yeah.
But I think that like a lot of these platforms like Twitch and such, like it's cool that there's an interactive portion
Oh
of it
yeah, for
where
sure. Yeah.
the audience can talk to each other or point things out that they enjoyed, and
Mhm.
it's nice to be able to watch archives of some of the stuff and see what people enjoyed about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also think like I did a live stream a couple months ago where I used 4 cameras, and it there was like inherent lag in it.
Yeah.
So I think there's technology issues with it where like the quality can't get where I envision it.
For
And I
sure.
think
For sure.
that I think the pandemic is speeding a lot of those things up. I mean, everyone has like a decent web camera now, and like and so I think that in time that will be cool. Maybe in the future I can envision like some sort of VR immersive like
Yeah. Right.
performance.
That'd be sick. I do see that you've been trying to get away, going camping and such, trying to avoid the election and all that
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah, that I think that's in relation to your question about quarantine. I had a really tough time being stuck at home. I had just moved here to LA about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, and so when the pandemic hit, I felt like there was momentum in the community I built and friends,
Hmm.
and just being acclimated to living in this city. And So yeah, my reaction to staying at home during this time has been not staying at home, which sounds really reckless, but I think it's I was actually describing this to a friend where I'm really vigilant about getting tested, and camping is for me it's an isolated thing that I've been enjoying. I've been going like dispersed camping and some
Oh,
on
that's
some
right.
camp some on some campsites, but like pretty much like if I'll go for an extended period of time and I'll go by myself. And it feels like the an activity that is very low risk in the way that I do it and the capacity I do it.
Oh, I'd say
And
camping's pretty low risk. I've gone a couple times too.
yeah, you're
And
outdoors,
it's by yourself, like unless you go
Yeah.
to a national park. I went to the Sequoias recently. A lot of people
Ooh.
there, but yeah, we
Yeah.
did like dispersed camping too. So
Nice.
we were actually planning on we had this whole trip planned. We were gonna go backpacking, and then we were
Yeah.
gonna come back from the trip, stay dispersed camping to stay away from people, and then just like drive through the Sequoias and stuff and check it out. But I fell and almost like broke my
Oh
ankle on the backpack and had to hobble back. And we're like, well, I guess we're gonna have a weekend of just dispersed camping. So
man.
yeah, it was a bummer, but it was cool. And at least we had our cars, so we could still like drive around and check stuff out. So it still worked out. But yeah, camping, great time. I think it's an amazing thing to do.
Yeah, like, are you okay, by the way?
Oh, yeah, I'm chilling, dude. I thought it was broken. And then, I was able to walk on it the entire time, too. Like,
Yeah.
I just walked on it, and my girlfriend's like, I think you might have broke it, and you're just walking on it. And so I'm like, dude, I've been walking on it for 3 days at this point. Like, I
Yeah,
gotta
you just
go get
gotta
x-rays. So I went to the
totally.
hospital, and they're just like, yeah, like, we can't see anything wrong with it. And you said you've been walking on it for like, you know, 3 days. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, I don't think it's broken. And I'm like sitting there with my girlfriend, like, I literally told you this, like, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I need to get a 4x4 to do some of this dispersed camping that been doing.
yeah.
It's like some of like I went to Anza Borrego recently, and
Oh, that's sick.
yeah, I went with my cousins, which they all have like Forerunners and Land Cruisers, and they're all
Mhm.
lifted. And but it certainly opened my eyes to the possibility of like where you can go. I mean, I recently took a trip to Austin, Texas, and
Mhm.
camped on the way back and drove through New Mexico and Arizona, and everyone had like Tacomas and all these big trucks, and I kind of understand why now. It's like you can go into these like really beautiful isolated
For
areas, and
sure, dude. Yeah.
just the kind of I used to like associate that stuff with kind of redneck, like right wing, like but I kind of understand the appeal of having that like a big truck, which
Dude, no,
sounds
for sure. Yeah. I feel like the landscape is like totally changing in terms of like that type of stuff. I always think
yeah,
it's funny. I saw this like meme one time where it was like, Bass Pro Shops is like where all the conservative Trump supporters go, and then you have,
yeah,
REI where all of
REI with the
the
liberals.
yeah, the liberal city folk go.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I get you. I took my little two-wheel drive Corolla, my Toyota,
Wow,
yeah, back
man.
there, dude. And I think I broke one of the exhaust hangers and like bent the
Oh
exhaust.
man,
Yeah, and
yeah.
yeah, my car was just destroyed, and I haven't driven my car for like a month, but I actually just sat down with my friend and repaired that bad boy. It took us like 3 days, dude. It
No
was
doubt, no
insane.
doubt. Yeah, you always kind of cringe when you're like scraping the
Oh
underbelly of your
my
car.
god.
You're like,
So right,
or
you're
like,
like, yeah, that's not gonna be good. Yeah.
yeah. But there are areas in California, like I think Alabama Hills is pretty doable, like with just a smaller car.
Yeah.
It's pretty wide open. But yeah, I grew up in California, and this is kind of I spent a lot of time in New York. I spent like about 10 years in New York, and I actually didn't get my license until like 4 years ago. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, to explore California in this capacity is really nice. I mean, it's ironic that I just got my license. I'd been playing in touring bands for, yeah, like 10 years, and I'd
Yeah.
always be like the person that navigates,
That's so funny.
but
Yeah, I
so
have a
yeah,
bunch of friends like that too from Santa Barbara that went to like other places, that grew up in like other big cities. They're like, dude, I just didn't need it. So
yeah,
I never
totally.
got it. But
Yeah, I lived in the Bay Area. I spent some time in San Francisco, and then I lived in New York, and it just seemed cumbersome to have a car. Like it didn't really make any sense in terms of
mhm.
my financial situation, or just like moving it and storing it. So
Yeah.
but now I'm like yeah, totally immersed in it, and I'm into cars. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's sick though, dude. I'm glad you're experiencing California in, I guess, this outdoorsy type of way.
gorgeous. I think where you're at and like near the Central Coast and stuff is like probably my favorite parts of
Oh yeah,
California.
beautiful, dude.
It's
Beautiful.
absolutely incredible. Not to be cliche, but I'm actually leaving today to go drive up to Morro Bay. Might head to
Oh,
Big
really?
Sur. Yeah, I'm gonna like drive up the one, and I'm like kind of excited to. Every time I do that, it's really nice.
Are you into backpacking at all?
I've never done that. You
Yeah.
should. We should do that when the pandemic is
Dude,
not
I'm down.
occurring.
That'd be really sick. My friend lives up in the Bay. And he's been trying to get me to go to this place called Lost Coast, which
Oh
is,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
have
yeah,
you heard of it?
yeah,
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 it's like
yeah.
Mendocino, what's it called? What's it called? Like Cape
It's like,
Mendocino or something like that up there, like Mendocino County, and
yeah,
like Humboldt and stuff like that. And you basically just like hike along this beach for like 20 miles, and you see like elephant seals and like all this stuff. Um,
Yeah,
Yeah, my friend
I've
did
heard
that.
great
Yeah,
things.
absolutely amazing. Central Coast, North Coast, absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
Six
yeah,
them. I haven't been
yeah.
up there enough, but I plan to. So.
Yeah, we should actually do that. Yeah, I've seen pictures of Lost. Like I've had a lot of friends that like have gone down there. Yeah, you have to kind of hike down there. I think it's hard to get a car to go down there.
Oh
But
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
yeah, we should do that sometime. I
Let's
think that's
let's
really
do it.
cool.
That'd be amazing. I actually have one of those 3D maps that I was telling you about of the Lost Coast. I'll send a copy to you.
Oh man, yeah, I'm excited. I recently I'm pretty minimal with my camping gear, and I recently just got like a big duffel bag that fits all of it that I can put on my back.
Oh,
So
that's
like
sick.
I'm totally into the idea of backpacking.
Oh hell yeah, that's tight. So, anyways, you're saying you're Los Angeles based now, at least. Growing up, I feel like there wasn't much going on in terms of like DIY music from in like a little California suburb. Uh,
Yeah,
so other than what a few people were doing here later on, so I like to ask this, I guess, because it varies by geographic region. But what was the scene like for you? Like, what scenes, I guess, were you involved in, and how has this like influenced you?
yeah. When I was growing up, I grew up in a small town called American Canyon, which is
Mhm.
wedged in between Vallejo and Napa, is like two ends of the spectrum. Napa is like fine wine, super affluent, fine
Mhm.
dining, and then Vallejo is birthed like E40 and Mac Dre and Too Short, and it's like it's like fizz culture was at its height when I was growing up, and American Canyon was a pretty diverse place. And but I started getting into the local scene. There was a lot of like at the time there were a lot of hardcore bands and screamo bands in Napa.
Mhm.
And there was
Really,
a
Napa? That's wild.
yeah, like Sonoma. There was like a lot of I saw a lot of shows at like VFW halls and like
That kind
like
of music.
yeah, and like garages and like Vallejo and I have like very vivid memories of seeing a lot of these bands and buying like 7 inches. And
Mm.
there was also intertwined with that there was the local radio station, which was Live 105,
Mhm.
and they played a lot of local. There was like like an hour every night where it was dedicated to local music. And
Well,
I
that's sick.
actually met some of my best friends that I still grow up or I still know and grew up with at the time. At this point, like 16 years, 17 years, through the love of some of those bands. There's a band called Local AM, which was like a kind of a pop punk, but they had like jazz influences. They were a little different. I don't know. It's kind of weird. I also grew up in like Warped Tour was a big thing and like the
Oh,
early aughts and stuff like that. Like like a lot of that was seemingly punk, but also intertwined as I look back at it now with like
mhm.
Commerce and a lot of those bands were like on big labels. They weren't like super indie or anything like that. But yeah, I spent some time, that was kind of my exposure to live music and, you know, um, just performance. And then I lived in Long Beach for a brief stint. I also worked at Amoeba in Berkeley when I was like 17. And so I got really connected to music through that way.
Oh, that's tight.
And then I moved to Long Beach for a small stint. My folks kicked me out, yeah, when I was like 17, 18, and I lived in Long Beach for a year. And I worked at a record store and I played music with some guys from Memphis, Tennessee. And I think at the time, the the kind of music we were listening to was like garage rock, and was big was like the Strokes and stuff like that. And
Oh yeah.
um, yeah, that was a small stint, and then I moved to New York, and that kind of opened my eyes to a lot of grander
Mhm.
being exposed to like Silent Barn and all these kind of DIY
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
spaces.
R.I.P. Silent Barn.
Yeah, and like market. Yeah, it's a shame a lot of these things are going the way of especially during the pandemic.
Mhm.
But I mean, this was also simultaneously when I was growing up, we used to take the ferry to San Francisco and see shows there. I had a friend that lived in the Mission.
Oh, it's
And yeah, it's interesting to see like I moved back to California maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it's I was kind of not around during the second tech boom, so I didn't really I knew that a lot of my friends like left San Francisco because it was so expensive, and alternatively moved to Oakland or over here, and I think
Mhm.
that's where my desire to come to LA was. But yeah, I moved back when Ghost Ship was burned down,
Oh yeah.
and that was a big signifier to kind of an end of a certain era. Like, even
Mhm.
though I lived in a DIY show space in Oakland, and there are things still happening, but yeah, I would say that New York was like, it's hard to articulate and reflect about those, 8-9 years I spent there, but
Mhm.
but I it was like a playground in a way, that you bring your own
Yeah.
beer, you go play shows, a lot of those spaces were, shows that were just, the venue, like insane, things for me to witness, and
Mhm.
the community aspect. I think that's what has been troubling for quarantine is, I try to stay active in seeing shows and supporting others and in my local community and collaborating, and
Mhm.
it's been hard for me to pivot some of those things. But yeah, that's kind of, yeah, I've seen a lot of dirty,
Yeah.
like, warehouse spaces.
Yeah.
um so that, yeah, that's kind of my trajectory, and I definitely do think that is important for me when I'm in a city, is seeing that kind of community or life. That's the stuff that kind of drives me in a way.
For sure. So I know you're saying you're in Los Angeles for a little bit. Were you like finding that sort of like community DIY scene type thing, and then
Yeah.
it kind of just disappeared, or?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these places, like there's a place in downtown LA called Coaxial, and
Oh
they've
yeah,
been doing,
coaxial tight.
yeah, they've been doing like like kind of performance shows where they're projecting onto their parking lot, and you can go park there, and yeah, my friend Anna just had a show there on Saturday, and showcased some films. So there's things that, that they're pivoting, but yeah, there's an
Mhm.
abundant amount of spaces out here.
Mhm.
I was a huge fan of Zebulon in New York, and there's a Zebulon here.
Oh, is that the same? Is that the same part of the same thing? Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, so yeah, in New York, when I had first moved there, I would go to Zebulon all the time, and in Williamsburg, before Williamsburg was, I mean, it was, being gentrified, but before it
Mhm.
had all these high rises over there. But it was the bar. The aesthetic is similar, but they kind of showcased a lot more experimental stuff there.
Oh, that's sick.
It was, I think one of the first shows I saw there was like kind of like a free jazz, like, it was like a quartet of like clarinet or like flautists. They were just like blaring, like, like it was essentially noise, but it was
That's kind of
super artistic
sick.
to me.
Yeah.
um and it blew my mind. I was like, this is what happens in New York bars. Like, this is cool, man. um but yeah, there's an abundant amount of spaces. I over the years I had heard over, of like Parispace out here,
Oh
and
yeah.
there's just, I had some friends move over here, so like I kind of knew that it attracted and had some sort of scene to harness
Mhm.
a lot of those creative types. um but yeah, I'm curious to see the landscape of what it'll be. I'm kind of hopeful that, like, a lot of these spaces that are asking for help or potentially will close down will I don't know, start anew, and during when things reopen, and it might be an exciting time again. It might be
Yeah,
like how I
hopefully, yeah.
felt, and when I first moved to New York and things were, kind of lawless in a way.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think just people are going to be like excited to partake in things, and having spent nearly a year, in our apartments or in our homes, I think people are going to be more apt to collaborate and do things. Like, I've been sitting here definitely regretting those times where I'm like, I mean, there's a bunch of memes of this, but like the kind of FOMO that I get where it's like someone's telling me about something and I'm like, I'm just going to stay home. And now I'm like, I
Yeah.
want to go out, man.
Yeah, I feel you, dude. That's funny.
um,
So, I guess let's jump into like your music now. So, what can you tell me about, I guess, your solo project? Give us the big picture and bring us back to like your humble beginnings in terms of like your solo music and stuff like that.
yeah, definitely. Um, Yeah, I think, I think a lot of it starts from my love of music. Obviously, I don't think I ever kind of envisioned myself pursuing a life of being a musician, but
Hmm.
I was introduced to a lot of things at a younger age that really piqued my interest, and felt like this was a way that I could express myself and express myself accurately. But yeah, when I worked at Amoeba, I had saved up to purchase a Fender bass, and that was kind of the origin of everything. And then I got into like Daniel Johnson and all these like kind of home recording projects early on.
Yeah.
And I had a mini disc, I think 4-track that I first purchased, and I would just record things. This is before like having a laptop and
Mhm.
being able to layer. But you know, I think I'll keep describing my journey, but I think a lot of it has been just curiosity and exploration.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
over the years, like you know, sometimes my voice is a guitar. These days it's cassette tapes or piezo mics. I like contact mics now, and like some modular, some synthesis.
That's
But I spent I spent years just playing in bands. I played in a group called Mutual Benefit with my friend Jordan Lee. I played in a band called Lizard Kisses with my ex-partner, and a lot of it was home recordings. It always started as home recordings, and then kind of had the mentality of like, where can we take this, And I had a lot of mentors along the way. I played, as a bassist, there was a lot of need for having me in some of these projects.
yeah.
So, when I was 20, I toured a ton for, maybe 2-3 years. My buddy, John Hunter, his brother, Jana Hunter, plays in Lower Dens, and we toured with them
Oh,
a
dang,
bunch.
that's
And
crazy.
yeah, so we toured with Lower Dens before they got signed to, I think, Ribbon Music.
Mhm.
And it was really, Jana had been in the DIY scene for a very long time. I'd actually known their music for quite a while through like Devandra Banhart, and was a fan. And I was into that whole like freak folk, like Joanna Newsom, and
Yeah.
there was just a crazy Baltimore scene at the time that I was playing with them. And Beach House is big, and
Oh, that's
Dan,
sick.
Dan Deacon, and so I
Really
was
nice.
exposed to a lot of that stuff early on. And Jana kind of was a huge inspiration, because they kind of showed me how you could do it, and do it
Mhm.
sustainably, like
Yeah.
converting your truck with vegetable oil to, or like,
Oh, that's amazing. Wow.
yeah, just like certain things where it was like, man, I like didn't know that this was possible, and like booking tours on our own,
Mhm.
like I didn't really I wasn't really introduced into like booking managers or booking agents until like
Mhm.
later in my life, where I had just been emailing venues like straight up and asking for guarantees, or like
Yeah.
um which in fact built an infrastructure for how I kind of run my music, or how I operate, and what my expectations are. But yeah, this last year, or the last 2 years, has been a lot of experimentation with different instruments. I recently picked up a clarinet, which maybe some people learned in high school or something like that, but I'm learning now as a 32-year-old. But yeah, I'm into degradation and processing things and running things through analog digital gear. And um lot of my recorded work is trying to you know capture a moment or emotion, or a feeling, and transposing that. I mean, I hope that part of my move to LA was to hopefully, as I've been segueing into instrumental music, was to maybe work on score work,
Oh, that's sick.
so and there were some projects before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and a lot of these film budgets were not available to me. So, but I'm gonna chug along. I've accepted the life that I live in
Yeah.
some way, and I'm happy with it. Like I love myself, and I like myself. Sometimes I'm like, man, maybe I went to culinary school when I was in my mid 20s, and there was a fork in the road where it was like this or touring, and I chose touring and music. And sometimes I think about a life that I could have had, making food, being
Yeah.
creative in food. I
Yeah.
can still do those things simultaneously, but it's just, I'm very passionate about making sonic, landscapes
Yeah.
and music. So
That's sick. Well, I mean, I loved hearing about your background and stuff. I guess what goes into like what experiences go into your music, I guess in general? Does this differ from piece to piece or like record to record?
yeah, I think that a lot of my music is, this is going to sound really depressing, but it's based around my human experience, which a
Hmm.
lot of it through my perspective is rooted in hurt. And the last record I made was aptly called Desolation, which I'd felt like I was in this kind of state of, I don't know, um, it's kind of hard to articulate some of this stuff, but yes, I think that my music is a reflection of who I am. Sometimes it's really beautiful and melodic, and other times it's dissonant, and I think it runs the gamut of those kind of emotions. And the process for them, it certainly differs from song to song. But when I'm working on a project, I try to keep a cohesive theme in terms of capturing how I feel during that time.
Hmm.
Yeah, the records I've put under my name, I did a split with a friend called The Widest Smiling Faces, and that was a kind of a lucid guitar loop recording session. I mean, I think we recorded maybe for like 10 hours. There was like
Oh
10
wow.
hours of like, material. Yeah, we just sat down in my practice space for, yeah, maybe like a day, and we just, and in between, like, takes, we just kept the tape rolling. And then it was a kind of a, maybe people won't notice it, but it was a very particular way that we edited it. At the time I was really into krautrock and can,
Yeah.
and hearing about how they used to splice tapes, and they do the same kind of method. I wanted to approach things in that manner.
Hmm.
But yeah, it kind of differs, song to song, how I'm inspired and what starts it. I don't have like, I have a lot of friends that are electronic musicians. They open up their Ableton, and they have a template for what they're making, and for me, it's kind of like, oh, I'm inspired by this cassette drone, or like, this buzz outside, or here, or like what, like, me putting a piezo mic on the wall and like thumping on it. It's those kind of things, like, are the things that spark my, my interest and my creation.
That's sick. So I actually want to ask this question for my friend. She said your music reminds her of driving down the 101 between Ventura and Santa Barbara. And I remember you telling me that
Oh
you
yes,
often make the drive up the 101 to slow. Does
yeah.
this influence any of your work?
Oh, certainly. I mean, those man, I had camped Dana Point the other week, and I I saw the sunset, and it actually, it was an anomalous day like 2 weeks ago, where like it was like maybe 90 degrees, but it was cloudy, and
Mhm.
there was the sun beaming through the clouds. And not to be like pretentious, or it reminded me of my work in a way, and it actually reminded me of the cover of my last single. Like, it looked
Mhm.
almost identical, and it
Yeah.
was this moment where I feel like, my work, yeah, is a culmination of a lot of these experiences. And
Yeah.
in particularly, like, I could say, yeah, the 101 has inspired me. I mean, it's a beautiful drive, and I try to definitely like instill some of those like, emotions and feelings into my music. So cool. That was a cool question, actually.
That's funny. Yeah, I remember you just telling me that one time, and I remember because she actually recommended your music to me, like, oh, you should check this out. And I was like, yeah, dude, I hit up Mark to play on my show, and he told me that he knows what KCSB is because of that drive, you know? And so
Yes.
he was like, oh, or she was like, do you think you can ask him, you know,
Oh,
like this
man.
question for me? And I was like, dude, I got you.
Tell her thank you.
Yeah. So I read on your website too that you traveled to like a bunch of different cities around the world as well, like Lisbon, Tokyo, Manila, and then you were saying you lived in Oakland for a while, often collaborating with other musicians. How did anything come out of your transatlantic travels?
Yeah, there's a record that I'm mixing right now. It's being finalized. That were songs that I prepared for a tour in Portugal, and I spent some time in Lisbon and Porto and Braga, and I met this beautiful couple. I want to shout them out. Nuno and Arita, or Rita. They run a small label called Favela Discos. I think they just put out their first vinyl release, which I want to congratulate them on. But I met them in Braga, and they're doing the artwork for they're printmakers, and they're doing the artwork for this record. That relationship kind of came happenstance. I booked a show blindly in Braga at a DIY spot, which was insane. I mean, it was like one of the coolest things I'd ever done by myself. I took a train to a random city outside of Porto, and the people at the DIY space picked me up at the train station.
That's
You
so
know,
cool.
and I barely knew much about them. Like vice versa, they'd heard my music and they put me on this bill, and they put me on the bill with Nuno, and we just hit it off. And sonically, like I was in love with his music, and the pairing was like just every time I've had these kind of experiences outside of the U.S. and not to say dismiss people that book or do curation here in the US. It just seems like so maybe it's also enwrapped in my experience, the newness of a new town or country. It just seems so like serendipitous or special. It was like it was meant to meet those people. And so yeah, I was actually, before the pandemic hit, I was planning to tour Mexico City, which I had some friends in, and go back to Portugal for an extended period of time and make music with Nuno,
Mm.
because they have a collective there. They have a huge studio, but yeah, some of those relationships or collaborations have just been happenstance. In Manila, I did a tour in Japan in 2016 or 17,
Mhm.
and afterwards I went to Manila, and I wanted to play some music with people that looked like me, and
Mhm.
I'd never done that in my life. And with the beauty of social media and Bandcamp and SoundCloud, I was able to reach out to these musicians, and I comprised a band of all Filipinos to play Lizard Kisses songs, and we played on a radio station,
That's so
and
sick.
yeah, it was insane. It was just through mutual interests on music. And
Yeah.
at the time, I coming from New York, I had a lot of my friends were in these bands that those people looked up to, and it
Mm.
was really inspiring to come full circle and do that. So yeah, I kind of just meet these collaborators along the way in these experiences that I
That's
have.
so
And
sick. That is so cool.
yeah, and I try to, with the utmost like sincerity, like I really care about these people, and I
Yeah.
want to, continue these relationships, because these are the kind of experiences I have that are like, that drive what I do. I'm like really
Mhm.
passionate about, like, and I want to reciprocate. Like I want Nuno and Rita to come over here, and I want some of those Filipino musicians in Manila. Like that was kind of an idea that I was starting to have, and if I had enough like financial gain and maybe an infrastructure or like a venue or something like that, it would be great to showcase some of that
Mhm.
stuff. I haven't really figured a way to to bring that here. I mean, in Japan, there was just a ton of people that, like, I saw a lot of musicians where I was like, I'd love to bring you to the States. They're like, this would be amazing. Like, like Oakland was, that place is really difficult for me, honestly. I think that
Yeah.
because of rent prices, and everyone's just working. Like I worked, funnily enough, I worked at Tesla for like a year, and
Oh, really?
yeah, I worked like 16-hour days, like building, cars. And I didn't have time to really, I did, like whatever time I could go, I'd go to like Pro Arts or, TAC, which is Temescal, like Art Center. I'd go to all these like spaces, and, Mills College is over there. So there's a lot of cool experimental music, like actually occurring in the Bay Area, like a lot of tape stuff that I love, like minimal music. But it's just so hard to partake and participate. I actually forced myself to live in, not forced myself, but it was the best situation for me. I lived in a DIY show space in Oakland, and I couldn't even I couldn't contribute because I was working so much, and it was tough for me. I mean, I worked at Tesla. I had to leave at like 4 a.m. There were like punk shows that would happen until like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And I was like, I lived in a loft space. I had no privacy. People would go in there, they'd like smoke cigarettes or whatever in my room. And it's just, I couldn't say anything, you know what I mean? This is what I signed up for. And the drums were like right behind my wall. So like,
God.
I just like, I would, I just put earplugs in, and like I had a face mask, and I just like try to get like whatever 3 hours of sleep I could get. But yeah, I think that like I've been, a lot of my work is and it's important to have community. I mean, with music, that's, the audience and then collaborators for me. It's like, as much as I love my own voice, I'm inspired by contributing voices to that, and sending a message. Though the last record I had, there were collaborations within that weren't sonic so much. Like I had my buddy Jake Falby play violin on the record, but I had one of my best friends master the record. I had another good friend do the artwork to it. Those are the things that, like, for me, it's kind of like Voltron or something like that. It all comes together, and that's what makes it important for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I guess before we move on, what was the venue that you lived in?
I was called Oakland Secret, which I think it's still operating. Or not during the pandemic maybe, but it's still around. It's a Victorian house on 5th and Broadway. It's beautiful. It's kind of divided into 3 portions, and one of it was a venue. And I think it was important for the scene. We had shows like pretty regularly, and it's definitely a space that, like, every time I go to the Bay, I drive past it, or I text one of the people that still live there, and yeah, it's a nice space. And I definitely, whenever things come back, I'm sure they're going to come back in full force and be around.
That's sick. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. Did you ever go to like 924 Gilman while you're out there?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I did that a bunch when I was a kid. I hadn't gone in like recent years. But yeah, I saw a bunch of shows there. Yeah, no, the Bay at its height, I feel like early aughts, like 2008, 9. I mean, there were a lot of bands coming out of that, out of San Francisco, like the OCs and Girls and Ty Segall. Like there was like just a ton of stuff, and it was super vibrant. And Oakland's taking some of that energy because people can't live in San Francisco proper and have transferred it to that. And I think there's alternative living that you can do out there. You can be a punk and like express yourself and live comfortably, I think, in Oakland somewhat. I don't know. I mean, I also had to work 16-hour days, so I can't. But
yeah, that's really cool. So I'm a big fan of all your work and your performances and your just your music in general and stuff. And looking at your Discogs, your catalog is pretty expansive. You're in a bunch of different projects and stuff like that. So I guess we'll start with the beginning. Can you tell me about Lizard Kisses a little more than you already mentioned?
Yeah, definitely. So Lizard Kisses was birthed out of a relationship with me and my then girlfriend, Corey Siegler. We met working at a museum together and dated shortly after. And our relationship it was a quite beautiful one, and it was, in the beginning, we spent a lot of time with each other, and I was always playing guitar, and I made all these kind of like I do now. I made a lot of instrumentals, and I kind of introduced the idea of her singing on top of them. And, you know, she at the time had, I didn't have like a nice laptop back then, and she had a MacBook or something, and I learned how to use GarageBand, and so
Oh,
that band actually was like my first foray into like home recording. Like, you know, I bought like
mhm.
USB mics and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and then I upgraded, got like an interface, and like bought an SM57 because everyone is like, that's the industry standard, man.
Yeah, right.
You can record everything with a 57. You know, there's been records that, you know, you can do the snare and the vocals on it, and
Yeah, right.
that was kind of like the thing that had started that. But we had this is, I think, the, you know, during that time Tumblr was a huge thing, and we had spent a summer at her parents' cabin in Vermont,
Mhm.
and we created a collection of songs. And then I took all the things that we both were skilled at. Corey was a printmaker, so she went to school
Mhm.
for letterpress, and so we handmade CDs, and
That's so sick.
she did the silk screening, and I took for the first run of them, we took Polaroids, and each one had a different Polaroid as the cover, and it was like this kind of special, like, you know, art object. And yeah, we I don't know, I think I sent it to like one or two blogs, and there was a blog called Altered Zones that was like associated with Pitchfork, and one
Mhm.
of them gave it like you know, highlight or showcase, and it kind of just blew up from there. You know, like I mean, we weren't a big band or anything like that, but kind of how I was
It's
talking about all the,
scene traction, you know?
yeah, you know, back then it was like, you know, checking how many people listen to your music on Last FM or something like that,
Yeah.
and it just like, who was like scrobbling it, and there was like a ton of it reached a wide audience. I think at the time people, I wouldn't say the internet was new, but I think the platform of blogging, like aside from like LiveJournal or whatever, was starting to gain traction, and people really cared about like what was best new music, and what was, you know,
Yeah.
what Tumblr was like writing about. And yeah, I mean, we took that kind of where we could, and we toured a bit, and we just met we had a lot of relationships that were, you know, started from that, you know. And you know, you probably will mention, you know, Mutual Benefit in my Discogs. We met Mutual Benefit through Tumblr by like
Mhm.
trading tapes online, and then
Oh, wow.
when he was on tour, he like stopped by New York, and he stayed at our place, and then, you know, he had Corey sing on, you know, on a song, and then we just became best friends. And then, you know, it's funny how a lot of those things, you know, turn out. Like, um my friend Emily Sprague, she has a band called Florist,
Mm.
and we took her out like on her first tour, like, you know, just by meeting them, like just meeting her like at a random show.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna ask you about your little 7-inch you put out with Florist.
Yeah, we played this place called the Delancey in New York, man, and I think Emily was like, I don't even think she was old enough to play the place. Like, she was
Oh,
maybe
wow.
17, she was maybe 17 or something. I think the venue might have like made her wait until she performed, and then like she had to promptly leave or something.
Oh, wow.
But I saw Emily with like an array of like guitar pedals, and her sound, she was like super mature for, you know, she actually reminded me of like a young Jana Hunter or something. She
Mhm.
just was crooning, like just so emotive. And yeah, I just was like, do you want to go on tour? Like, it's a small tour, but do you want to go like play like 7 shows up and down the coast? And we
Yeah.
made a 7-inch in, you know, kind of in preparation for that to sell at the shows. And
Mhm.
um again, like Corey, we printed them, you know, like Emily came over, and we relief printed them. I think we like carved it out of linoleum,
Oh, wow,
and
that's
printed
sick.
them. And my friend had a lathe cutter, so he cut the records. They weren't like the greatest quality, but they were like,
Mhm.
you know, to press a record is a lot of money, so we did a small run of them, like 50. But yeah, that's kind of Lizard Kisses. We made a bunch of records. You know, a lot of them were on the medium of CD. We made one that was a CD record, which is
Mhm.
like, so you can cut grooves into a CD, but you can also play the CD
Oh,
itself.
wow, that's literally I've never heard of that. That sounds really interesting, actually.
Yeah, so like, you know how CDs, they only, you know, when you burn onto a CD, they only need to read up until when it's burned, right? So
Mhm.
anything that's not burned, you can write on, or you can scratch up or whatever,
Mhm.
but you can etch, like, you know, you can put a song on there. So that's like we did
You
that
could
with a
play it
few.
on a record player too.
You
Oh
can,
wow, that's
yeah,
so sick.
it probably messes up your needle, but
Yeah.
like you could play it, and it's kind of a cool effect because you can play it on your CD player and then toss it on your record player and be like, yo.
Yeah.
And yeah, I actually just got a record cutter recently. That they're making these ones now, like in Japan. They're like toys essentially, like
Really?
for kids. Yeah, I'll send you a link later. That's like it's made by a Japanese like educational company that you have to assemble it yourself.
Yeah.
So it teaches kids how to like build this record cutter,
Mhm.
but you can cut onto like any kind of plastic or CD material, like
Dude, that's
grooves.
super like interesting actually. That's really cool. That'd be
Yeah,
really sick.
it's super rad. It's cool that like Japanese culture, they like just like make these things accessible, like they like there when I was like in my early 20s or something, someone had told me about this like risograph that they make. That's like
Mm.
it's essentially like a toy, and
Really?
you can do like like silkscreen or risograph prints like just pretty easily. It's probably hard now because you need bulbs for like to expose it, but they were Japanese toys, like they were common, and it's so cool that like they make those things. I think the thing that you can maybe compare it in American culture is like the like Betty Crocker toaster or something
Yeah.
like that. Like one of those things. Like, yeah, it can make a cupcake or something, but like these things can cut records and like make prints. Like that's cool, man.
Dude, that's crazy. And they're just toys.
Yeah,
That's if that's not DIY, I don't know what is.
totally.
But yeah, lizard kisses, dude. That's so sick. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think the pinnacle of that was that we got picked up by a Japanese label and then we toured Japan. And
Oh,
that was
really?
the last thing. Yeah, which is really cool. We opened up for Of Montreal,
Oh,
and
wow, that's pretty big.
yeah, it was a really cool experience, and so I think that's like a highlight I think of when I think of Lizard Kisses. But we kind of split ways, and Corey furthered her pursuit of textile art. She's
Yeah,
doing great stuff these days, and when the pandemic wasn't hitting, she was like doing exhibits and stuff, and I'm super proud of her.
that's sick. So is she doing music anymore, or is it mostly just like visual art? Like,
It's mostly visual art. Yeah, I think I might have like forced her to do music at times. I mean, I think she liked it. She loved it.
I mean, the experiences it sounds like you guys got from doing Lizard Kisses sounds absolutely amazing. I feel like not everybody can pull that off from just like a DIY band, you know?
Oh, totally. Yeah,
So you
it
guys
was.
took that pretty far.
Yeah, it was crazy to see. Like the reach that we got to. I mean, again, we weren't like huge or anything like that, but to see people like in Russia buying our tapes and stuff like that, it's cool.
That's insane. That's so sick.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and you called it. What can you tell me about your work with Mutual Benefit? I saw that like Love's Crushing Diamond was on your Discogs.
Yeah. So yeah, Jordan was a friend of ours over the years, and I loved his music so much that I decided to release that record. So funnily enough, I did the first run of that record before it got picked up by a label. I played guitar on that record. It was kind of a funny the way that Jordan had worked at the time, because he was transient. He was like moving around from city to
Yeah.
city. He'd sleep on floors and then record his friends, and it was just a collection of these. He molded those songs, but he had all his friends play on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think it kind of mirrors some of my workflow too, but maybe not in the same kind of exact workflow that he had. But he had all these collaborators just play on that record, and Corey sang on the record. She actually did the artwork too. So like yeah, I feel like that was like a Lizard Kisses kind of collaboration project in a way, because we had released it and like did the artwork and we played on it. So I played guitar on that record, and yeah, Jordan had put it up, and it like sold out in like a day or two or something. Like Pitchfork gave it
Yeah,
like the
dude,
best new.
Pitchfork blew that thing up.
It was insane. It really having been like in my mid 20s or something, it was a trip because it happened kind of overnight, and it was like all the things that I had at that point been working towards and idealizing or romanticizing was being presented to us. Like a
Yeah.
label gave us an advance. Like we bought a 15 passenger van, and it was like, now you're gonna play like BBC Radio and KEXP, and you're gonna
So
go
crazy.
do a La Blaga Tech, and you're gonna play South by Southwest, like the Pitchfork stage, and it was all this just kind of like, I think that we weren't prepared, and I think that's kind of, Jordan has a rotating cast of members that
Hmm.
happens in that band, and maybe it would have happened that way either way, but I think it was hard to navigate, being in a band, and especially in a band in that size. Like,
Hmm.
at times it was like a 7-piece band. We had violins and keyboard players, and I kind of, I've been listening to some like music podcasts, and I recently came across one of that band, the Arcade Fire,
Oh yeah.
and they were talking about how it's difficult to navigate now that everyone's older and they live in different places, and they don't live in a collective anymore, and that kind of was, I kind of felt that. I was like, yeah, this is really
Yeah.
hard to navigate, like 10 people's lives. It's like people have different aspirations and different, some of it comes down to money, some of it comes to like, experience, or I want to come home to an apartment, and
Mhm.
so some security there. But yeah, that record, it was, I mean, I look back fondly on a lot of those songs where it was, the way it came about, and my guitar parts, they were just, Jordan with a Behringer like mixer or something, like it was like really like,
Very,
crappy gear,
yeah, very
like really cheap, like lo-fi, it was, and it came out beautifully, like the way it was
Mhm.
mixed and mastered. And Jordan definitely has a talent in bringing that stuff together. But yeah, I got to see somewhat of the world doing that. Like we toured the US and went to Europe a couple times,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was, that was, I like that record a lot. I'm proud to have that as part of like some of my work.
Yeah, that's super beautiful. I love hearing that experience. That's insane. Like, I didn't know you actually like played in the band, like touring and stuff. I thought like you maybe just like a session musician, but it's like interesting to hear that it was just like home recordings, that you guys just like did in
Yeah,
a house or something, like
totally. Yeah, it was like my living room in my Brooklyn apartment. I had like a line 6 like guitar amp with like
yeah,
some Behringer pedals or something, and I made do, and it sounded lush, and it just happened, and it
yeah.
then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, Pitchfork gives you 4
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like it's insane, dude. Like
yeah,
when you see something that's pitchfork, you don't think like DIY
yeah,
anymore.
totally.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you're just like, oh yeah, that band's forked. Yeah, they're blowing
Totally.
up. They're making tons of money, like they don't need
Sure.
my support on Bandcamp, like, that type of stuff. But
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, I think we were like in a print edition of like Rolling Stone where they gave us like 4 out of 5 or something like that. It was weird. It just turned our world upside down. It was like, but it also created like some disillusion. Like, are we household names? Like, are people going to care? Like, but like that first tour we did, there was a lot of shows that were sold out. We played like up and down, the West and East Coast and Canada, and it was received well. I think that the band just kind of, we just split like afterwards. I mean, he kept doing the project and he had some members, but I think the core, the essence of that record was kind of done after that point. But I can't speak for Jordan. That might be offensive to him. He's doing his thing, man.
that's sick. Yeah, I actually had the opportunity to host Mutual Benefit in Santa Barbara. That was one of the last shows that we had
Oh,
before COVID hit. It was with like, are you familiar with this band called Sonoda?
Sonoda. Yeah. I'm really good friends with Noah, so
Oh yeah.
I know Sonoda through his label,
Yeah,
and I've seen them. I've seen them play. They actually, I think they did something for Coaxial where they did like a live performance in nature, and
they
they,
might have, yeah.
yeah, really
They're
talented,
yeah,
really
they're
talented.
very talented, amazing. I've had them on the show one time, long time ago. That was like one of the beginning first things I actually ever had on TBD
Yeah,
live in the studio was Sonoda and this other band, New Balance. They were on like a little tour. And then
oh,
Lisa
that's
hit me up
awesome.
again like last spring and was like, "Hey, we're gonna host this band Mutual Benefit. Like, do you think you can give us a space?" And I was like, Oh hell yeah, dude, that's sick.
That's awesome, man. That's
Yeah, and
awesome.
yeah, I didn't know that Mutual Benefit was like a full-on band with like a bunch of different collaborators at like any different time because it was just like Jordan and Noah, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
totally. Yeah, no, it's like
yeah,
kind of, the way that I've been in some of these bands, it's like fluid in the sense it's like, hey, can you go on tour for like 3 weeks? And it's like the drummer, and he's like, I can't. And then it's
yeah,
like, okay, we have to adapt these songs to not have a drummer now, like,
yeah,
which is cool. It's kind of a cool challenge. I wouldn't pose that, long term, but like that's like cool to be like, hey, this tour, it can only be two guitarists, or like, Noah who plays, flute and bass or synth, or, and then you adapt the songs. It kind of gives a different life, and
yeah,
like a different sonic experience for the listener. Um,
yeah. No, totally. My friend Maddie that like I mentioned that wanted me to ask you
oh
the
yeah, yeah,
one
yeah.
question. Yeah, she got really into Noah's label, like Never Content. Have you
Yeah.
ever? Yeah, and I think that she actually found like a recommendation on Bandcamp from Noah, which is your music, and I think that's how.
Oh,
Yeah, I found out. Yeah, I think that's what it was from. So
awesome, dude. See, this is how it all connects, and this is how,
yeah,
like,
for sure. I didn't know that there was this like huge connection. This is crazy. I was just like,
yeah.
oh, dude, Mark's music is honestly just really cool. I didn't know there was like this like back connection with like mutual benefit and all that. That's really sick.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's cool, man.
So I guess we're getting close to wrapping up here in
Yeah.
terms of like questions and whatnot. And I like to just ask this question to everybody, but how has the pandemic influenced you directly? I know that you've kind of like we've talked about this a little bit, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually just went through a breakup or a split like 4 months ago, and I think part of it, I mean, most of it was due to the pandemic and having to pivot individually, like just our lives, and what was important to us. So I think, honestly, for me, it's been a lot of, how the pandemic, it's kind of looking at how I operate in a different perspective, and actually, because of the breakup and stuff, spending some time alone, like in actual isolation, like remembering and recalling like things that I loved by myself. I'm reading a lot of books. I'm watching a lot of film, and I think it's actually like, it's easy to spin this a positive or negative way, but I think it's been this anomalous time that collectively, the whole world has been going through, where they're kind of reevaluating what they're doing and
mhm.
the importance of it, and how it contributes to the greater world. So I think for my work, like I spent a lot of time honing some of my craft, which I, having talked about these experiences that I've had, like living in Oakland, stuff like that, and not being able to, working so much and not being able to have time to myself. It's cool to have, or it's very valuable for me to have this time to like learn how to play clarinet, or reintroduce guitar into my life, or learn a some piano phrasings, or so those are important things for for myself, and my music, just these tools that I can kind of hone. It's like
Mhm.
sharpening a knife or something like that, and yeah, like reading has been, I don't know, I've spent months where like I'll read like magazine articles or like short stories or something like that, but it's nice to like be able to like, like delve into like, bell hooks or something, and
Yeah.
like and really get, reread it a bunch of times and get it, like those are, it's nice to have that time,
Yeah,
um,
totally. Well, I'm glad to see that at least something positive came from it. Not everybody I feel like can say that,
yeah,
especially in like the early stages of this thing, it kind of just messed a lot of people up. But I think once you kind of learn how to adapt, some cool things can come from it. You can find time to just do different things. Like,
totally. Yeah.
you know,
Who knows where I'll be living in a couple months. I since my girlfriend had, or ex-girlfriend left, like I had to pay the whole, I'm paying the whole rent now. And it's like,
Oof.
I don't know financially where I'll be, but I'm comfortable knowing that I'll be safe, and I have the
Yeah,
ability to figure all this stuff out. But yeah, I mean, it's really tough. There's so many people that are unemployed or like being evicted and stuff like that, that I feel blessed,
yeah,
that I'm able to, eat and like have a roof over my head, and and do leisure things like read and stuff. I mean, I probably need to get back on my grind and find a job or something, but
Save, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll take that UI money until it runs out, you know.
Oh, for sure. Save, yeah. So, I guess shout out some music you've been digging currently. Shout out some people you want our listeners to hear and check out.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of rap lately. So like 21 Savage, that new record's really hot. But in terms of like my peers and stuff, Julian Montenegro, who filmed the live stream you just watched, he makes really great music under the name Brown Bach. I'm sorry, Julian, if you've been wanting to keep that moniker under wraps. But my friend Sergio Garcia, I just did a film with him that features a song off Desolation. Serge, he's an electronic music in Berlin. He goes by Gordo. Has a couple 12 inches out. Check that stuff out. Let me see. This is a nice Ana Luisa Patrisco. She's a Filipino artist out here.
Is that the one that did the films at Coaxial, I believe you said?
Yeah. She has a lot of great music that's out right now. She does a lot of mixed media, super inspiring. Yeah, I mean Noah Klein, never content. He's always doing big things. Like he's really culling community and bringing things together. I see him as a a maverick in a way where he's connecting people, and I think that's really cool. Yeah, I think those are the things on the top of my head. Jake Falby, who played violin on my record, he plays he's played violin on like Julie Burns' record and Juliana Barwick. He's super incredible. He has a solo record that's tentatively going to come out. I've been working with him in the studio at times. He's super amazing.
That's sick.
But yeah, and I also just want to shout out you. I really appreciate you giving me the time to speak about my music and talk and present something. So
yeah, for sure. I'm happy that I could give you the space, and I'm happy you're stoked on it. So yeah, thanks again for being on the show, dude.
Yeah, totally.
Like people always talk about like their creativity and what keeps them going and stuff, and I guess that's like what my radio show is for me. So I guess just being able to give other people a space is like what I just like to do. It's just fun,
No, it's incredible. Yeah, you're giving, so I can give. So hopefully the next person can give. Like I want it to like be sustainable for everybody, and but I just wholeheartedly appreciate the fact that you even listen to my music.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess, do you have any last remarks you want to put into the airwaves, or like where can people keep up with your projects?
Yeah. So you can go check my music out at marcmerza.com or marcmerza.bandcamp.com. I am not much of a social butterfly, but I do post things on my Instagram, which is my full name, Markel Merza. It's Marchael, Merza. Hopefully you can get that. It's a funny. My parents put their names together, Marjorie and Michael, and it's Markel, and people can't pronounce it most of the time because it looks like Marshall.
Dude, that's so sick. It's such a sick name.
Yeah, you can check that out. Yeah, I hope that everyone stays safe. Wear a mask. Be conscious about the people around you and the people you love. And we'll get out of this. And I just want to send my love to everybody.
Shout out. So before you go, I have one more question. It's kind of a doozy. Are you ready for it?
Come on, Thomas.
So not everybody's ready for this. So I hope you're prepared. A rat is going to jump into your mouth. Do you want this rat to jump head first into your mouth or butt first into your mouth? And why?
Oh man. I think head first. I think butt first. Like I've seen those rat droppings when I lived in New York. Gnarly, man.
Oh yeah. New York rats, dude.
I mean, I can only imagine what those rats are gnawing on. I mean, I used to take the trash out in my New York apartment, and like, I'd put it in the trash can, like 10 of them would disperse, and I know they were like gnawing on my like pizza crust or like old dairy or whatever. It's probably gross, but I don't know, maybe that's painful actually if it goes head first, right? Like maybe it's like clawing or biting on its way down.
It might. I know someone on my show brought up one time that like a medieval torture technique was to like put a rat on them with like something over it, so the only way it could get out was to burrow through, you
Oh man,
know?
yeah, that's gnarly. But yeah, I think I'd go mouth first. I mean, then I can like dangle it like from its tail or whatever into my
Yeah.
mouth or whatever. Like that's like if it jumps in there, I don't know. Butt first seems, yeah. Seeing rat droppings is like gnar to me, man.
Oh yeah.
I think I'm gonna get like rabies or whatever, the plague either way
All
eating that thing.
right.
But
Yeah.
um,
Don't want to get hantavirus from the
exactly.
droppings, you know what I'm saying? You don't know where that thing's been.
Totally.
Uh, my personal favorite that I always shout out is the vegan option. You let it go butt first, you calm it down, you pet it a little bit, and then you have a ratatouille homie you put under your hat. Who needs culinary school when you got a little homie under your hat? You know what I'm
That's pretty good, man.
saying?
That's and I will say, someone that spent some time in culinary, that's probably one of the best culinary movies like ever made. Is Ratatouille.
Classic, dude. Classic.
Classic. Yeah. Don't watch Chef. Don't watch like any of these other like that romanticizes like the cooking life. Ratatouille is pretty accurate, man.
That's sick. Well, anyways, that's about all we have for today. So be sure to tune into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. and NetNet Radio every Saturday, 8 to 10 p.m. Yeah, thanks again, Mark. This has been great.
Yeah. Thank you so much.